Hey everybody, my name is Jeremiah Craig. I am a singer-songwriter, storyteller, and cowboy boot enthusiast. And if there's one thing that I would call myself above all of those other things, it would be a balladeer, because I absolutely love folk ballads, singing them, performing them, learning them. Ballads are my passion. I absolutely love it. But what is a folk ballad? You know, it's different from a lot of the other ballads that you hear about in classical music, in classic rock, in jazz. Ballads are generally something romantic with a slower tempo. In folk music, it really has no restrictions on tempo, time signature, key, chord progressions. It just doesn't matter. The only thing that does matter, though, is that the folk ballad tells a story, and it has to tell a story in the same way that a book would, or a podcast would, or a movie would. You have to have characters, you have to have conflict, and you have to have resolution. You need those three things in order to have a folk ballad. And there are some things that you can add in there. A lot of folk ballads have dialogue between two characters. That makes it really interesting. In fact, I'm going to use an example here of an old Scottish folk ballad. It's called The Lass of Glenshee. This is a love ballad, and there is dialogue in it. It's about a king who finds a woman in the town who he absolutely adores, and he tries to convince her to marry him. And the conflict comes when she refuses. So I'm going to play those parts right now. One bright summer's morning, as day was a-dawning, the bright Phoebus had risen from o'er the lea, and I spied a fair maiden all down by the river, herding her flocks on the hills of Glenshee. Well, I stood in amazement, said I, pretty fair maid, if you will come down to St. Jamestown with me, for there's ne'er been a lady set foot in my castle, there's ne'er been a lady dressed grander than thee. A coach and 6 horsemen to go at your bidding, and all men that speak shall say ma'am unto thee, and servants to serve you and go at your bidding. I'll make you my bride, my sweet lass of Glenshee. And she says, what do I care for your castle and coaches? What do I care for your gay grandery? For I'd rather be home at my cot at my spinning, or herding my flocks on the hills of Glenshee. So you just heard the king and the woman exchange lines, and of course she doesn't want to go with him. But this is where the king replies, now away with such nonsense and get up beside me, for when summer has come, my sweet bride you'll be, and then in my arms I will gently caress thee. 'Twas then she consented, and I took her with me. Now many years have rolled on since we have united, and there's many a change, but there's no change on me. And my love, she's as fair as the morn on the mountain. I plucked me a wild rose from the hills of Glenshee. Yes, many years have rolled on since we have united, and there's many a change, but there's no change on me. And my love, she's as fair as the moon on the mountain. I plucked me a wild rose from the hills of Glenshee. So, as you can see, the story resolves with the king and the woman, now his wife, living happily ever after. Now, you can interpret this story in a couple of different ways. I mean, maybe he had to do a little bit more convincing to get this woman to marry him, or perhaps because he was the king, she had no other choice based off of the time that the song was written. I mean, it was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And that is the really cool thing about folk ballads, is that they tell a story of history. All the stories may not be true. They don't have to be true. Sometimes they are. But it still offers us a glimpse into what life was like back then and how different people communicated with each other. That's what I love about folk ballads, is that they have a certain historical aspect to them as well. I just can't get enough of it. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you go out and listen to a whole bunch of different folk ballads if you want. I have a bunch on my Spotify, on my Apple Music. Just search Jeremiah Craig and you'll find me. Or you can subscribe to my channel, and I am here every Monday morning streaming some music with some coffee. I call it my coffee and music segment. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a spectacular day. Peace, everybody.